everybody, and welcome to the Ciao Enchanted Land mini album tutorial series designed for Scrap and Create. All of the products that I am using here that are from the Scrap and Create website are listed in the description box below, so you can just click on those links and follow along in the tutorial. In today's video, we're going to begin by assembling the cover for the album. Now, if you are using the kit that I have in my Etsy shop, which is linked in the description box below, you'll have these 5 pieces here. If you are planning to cut your own cover out of chipboard, we're going to go through some measurements so you can cut your pieces. So first, you will need 2 pieces that measure 7 3/4 by 8 3/8 of an inch. So I have 2 of those. Then we have 2 pieces for the spines. The first one is 2.5 by 8 3/8. This is the left spine piece. The right spine piece is 2 5/8 by 8 3/8. So it's 1/8 of an inch taller so that it will go up past. That way the other piece will lay flat. Then this piece, if you are going to be making yours, this part here is 2 inches by 8 3/8. So you can cut a 2 inch by 8 3/8 inch piece and do that. But if you want this cutout look here, you can also measure 2 inches, set your butterfly pieces, trace around them, and then cut using scissors around that and place your pieces like I've done. So it's really up to you. Either way is perfectly fine. If you just do that 2-inch piece, once the decorative paper is on there, you can lay those butterflies on top and get a similar effect. Next, I have 5 pieces of my white cardstock. They are all cut to 1.5 inches by 8 3/8 of an inch. Then I've taken it on the 1.5 inch side and I've scored all of my pieces at 3/4 of an inch. Once I have them scored, I'm going ahead and I'm just going to crease them a little bit. I'm not going to use my bone folder here. Just want to give it that nice crease so I know where that fold is. I'm going to be laying my pieces upside down in the order that they are going to go on. So I have my edge piece with the butterflies, then I have my 2 5/8 inch piece. I have my front cover piece, my 2.5 inch spine, and my back cover. Oh, this is actually the back cover there, and then the front cover. So I've got front cover, 2.5 inch spine, back cover, 2 5/8 inch spine, and then the wrap piece that goes on the front. We're going to be assembling these pieces in order, so I'm going to set these ones aside and just focus on the front cover and the 2.5 inch spine. I'm going to take one of my pieces, so where it's folded like this, I'm going to smooth this down and I am going to place my piece so that the edge of my cover is right at the edge of that score line so that that fold actually is right where that edge is on the page. So I'm going to take my adhesive and on this entire 3/4 inch side, I'm going to place adhesive. And then once this is adhered, I'm going to show you how we're going to leave that gap between the cover and the spine section. So I'm first going to line this up like that. Then I'm going to flip this over and make sure that its top and bottom are straight across with the cover. And then I'll burnish this down. Now I'm going to take my other spine section for just a minute and place these 2 pieces together. Now I'm going to put this up against here so that the edge of these is up against the edge of my cover, and I'm going to take my pencil and draw a line. So this is how much space I need to have between my cover and my spine piece. This is 1/8 of an inch for me because my pieces are 1/16 of an inch thick. Yours might be a little bit different if you are using different chipboard. So you want to put 2 times your thickness there, and then you want to make sure that you don't put your spine piece past that line. It has to be on the right side of it. So I'm going to take that piece and put it back where it goes. And then I'm going to take my adhesive and apply my adhesive here on this section to the right of that line. I'm going to use my ruler down here at the bottom just to push this flat against it. Then I'm going to take my spine piece. I'm going to place it flat against the edge of my ruler, and then I'm going to make sure that it is to the right of that line. If it's not exactly on the line, that's okay, but you want to make sure it's to the right of it, not to the left of it. Having a little bit more space is okay, but having too little space is not. That's what'll cause it to crack. So once I have it there, I'm going to go ahead and burnish it from this back side. So now I have my front cover and my left spine. I'm going to take my second piece and I'm going to adhere it here in the same way that I did with the first one. So I'm going to first take my adhesive and apply it to this whole 3/4 inch section. Using my ruler again, I'm going to set my ruler down here and then slide my paper in. And I'm going to flip this over and burnish this. So now this one goes right at this edge. We need to leave that space again. So now we'll take the 2 spine pieces, put them together, flush up against this edge, and mark on the piece. Now we've got the back cover, and my back cover just has my business name on it that'll actually be covered with the decorative paper. It's the same as the front cover, so it's not like it really matters if it's on the front or the back. Once I have my adhesive on that piece, I'm going to use my ruler, place my cover down, line everything up, make sure that it is to the right of that line, and then I'm going to adhere this down. And now I see that my paper is actually a little bit larger than my album. So I'm going to take my scissors and just cut away that excess paper so it's nice and straight across. So there is the start of our album. But remember, we're going to add the next spine and the piece on the cover. So I'm going to take another one of my papers and apply the adhesive in that first side. I'm going to add this piece This one's a little long too, so I'll end up having to trim it. So next I'm going to take my 2 spine pieces again, line them up, using the adhesive again, apply adhesive to the right of that line. Now I'll use my ruler, have my 2 5/8 inch spine piece that I'm going to place next. Couldn't see my line, I had to move it to see it. All right, so there's that. I'll adhere this down. Flip it to this side to burnish. Then I'm going to use my scissors again because this one is way too long. Trim that off. Much better. And then we're going to add one more piece. So I'm going to take my adhesive and apply it first to half of my piece. And I'm going to place this right down on here, right up against that score line. And burnish down on both sides. Now, since I don't have 2 pieces left, I'm going to just use my ruler and I'm going to mark on my piece 1/8 of an inch and then draw myself a line so that I know where to place my piece. Then I'll add my adhesive and we'll apply that final part of the cover. I'm going to use my ruler across the bottom, and then I'm going to take my final piece with my butterflies and adhere it down. And then burnish this. Then I'm going to take my scissors and cut off this little bit here that's sticking out above the cover. And so now we have our cover like this. And everything is lined up. We need to go ahead and add some pieces in here to cover up the inside though. So I told you to cut 5 of those pieces and I only needed 4. So I have 4 more of those pieces that are 1.5 by 8 3/8. And I'm actually going to check these ones before I put them down. So they're a little too large. So I'm just going to be trimming them slightly. That way when they're here, they won't stick over. You can also wait to trim these like I did after I put the first ones on. But I'm going to trim them before I put them on. That one looks good. That one's actually a little bit shorter than it should be, but it'll be fine, so I'm not going to recut it. And this one's good. Okay, so with these ones, what I'm going to do is try to center it over here. Now you can make a mark and you can actually perfectly center it if you want to. I'm just going to eye mine when I do this. I'm going to remove these ones and I'm just going to do them one at a time. And I just picked this one up first, so that's what I'm going to be doing. I would normally have done this from side to side, but I didn't, and that's okay. So I've got this first one. You can see where it is about halfway, so I'm going to place it here and lay this down and burnish it with my bone folder. And then very gently, I'm going to press the paper in between my covers. Since there is adhesive on that paper, it should catch the paper on the other side. And you don't want to tear here, so that's why you want to be very careful when you're doing this. And then burnish down on those strips. So now my paper should be good in the middle. Come over here and do this one next. Being very careful again with this one, you want to make sure that you do the same thing as before, just gently using your bone folder to press the papers together. And sometimes I will just pull up and crease it a little bit. That'll kind of get it started too and kind of bend those fibers a little bit. Okay, so we've got two. We'll go ahead and do the same thing with these two. Once I have my piece centered, I'm just going to go ahead and adhere my sides down and then press in the center and start working that paper in between those two chipboard pieces. Now I'll go ahead with my final piece and cover that final seam. Okay, so now we have all of these. I'm going to start over here and I'm just going to bend up. So now we have our cover shape. For the hinge pieces, we need one piece that measures 2.5 by 8 1/4 and one piece that measures 3.5 by 8 1/4. On both of these pieces, I'm going to score on the short side at 1/2 inch intervals along the entire piece. So on the 2.5 inch, it's going to be at 1/2, 1, 1.5, and 2 inches. And then on the 3.5 inch piece, I'm going to do that same thing. So I've got a 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 1.5, 2 inches, 2.5, and 3 inches. Once I have my score lines, I'm going to start with the 1/2 inch section on the outside and go from that score line and miter my corners. I'm going to do this on both sides. So my piece is like this, and I will do the same thing on my 3.5 inch section. So the piece looks like this. And now I'm going to take my bone folder and I'm going to fold my hinges on those score lines. So you want to be careful here that when you're folding these, they stay straight. So I fold and I start in the center and press down and go up, making sure that that line is straight. So I'm holding it in place so that it's not moving at all. Then I'm going to take the next one. And now I'm going to make sure that this is straight across, and I'm going to smooth that down and up. I'm going to come over here to the other side and do the second one first, smoothing it out, making sure that it stays nice and straight. And then folding the fourth one in, same thing. So I'm being very careful to make sure that these are straight because it's very easy to get these to get off that fold and then your pages won't stay straight. Once we have the hinge scored in the first direction, I'm just going to fold backwards on all 4 of them and use my bone folder to crease in the opposite direction. So now I have my first part. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with my larger hinge. Once I have my pieces, my hinges, I am going to go ahead and put them together. So I've got 2 pieces on each side folded up so that I have the center piece flat. Now I'm going to take my adhesive and apply it into the center section on the whole entire thing, making sure it's covered. Then I'm going to adhere this to the center one section on this hinge. I'm going to line everything up and make sure everything's straight. I'm using those score lines to help me. That's what these ones are here for, actually. Make sure everything's lined up. Then I'm going to lay it down flat. And then I'll use my bone folder to burnish these together. Then I'm going to take the first 2, increase. Then I'm going to fold those over and take the other 2, increase this again. Just so that I know everything lays nice and flat and that this is adhered together. So now I have those. I will take my 2 on the ends and fold those up. So I have my hinge piece. I'll bring my cover back in, and my hinge section is going to go here between the front and back cover. I'm going to use my centering ruler to mark a 1/2 inch from each side so that this is in the center. So my hinge section needs to be right here. I'm gonna double check. I always double check to make sure everything fits correctly, just to be sure. I would rather check my measurements to make sure than glue it down and it not be correct. So I've got these marked, and I'm just going to set my spine piece right in there. So with those 4 tabs flipped up, we've got 3 sections here on the back side, and I'm going to go ahead and cover this whole entire thing with my glue. Once I have my adhesive on, I'm going to go ahead and line up my piece in between those marks. Excuse my head for a moment as I look and make sure that it's lined up at the top. So I only have a little tiny bit also. I'm gonna flatten this now that it's in the right position. I only have just a little tiny bit more above and below this piece because my cover is only 1/8 of an inch taller than my pages. So my pages are going to be 8 1/4. My cover is 8 5/8 or 8 3/8. So I just want to center that so that it sits in there right in the center. And then I am just going and adhering this down, bending those hinges up and using my bone folder to press all of this down as flat as I can get it between those hinges. So those gussets, I really need to be adhered well to my spine section. So we've now got our hinge in our album and our cover is ready to go. You can go ahead and bend these in a little bit more. If I do this, it'll allow my album to close a little bit easier. There we go. That one. And then once things are inside, obviously I'll have magnets holding this and it will close a little bit easier. Now that we have the cover and the hinges in, I'm going to go ahead and set this aside, and we're going to begin building the base pages for the album. We're going to be building 4 pages in our album, and they are going to be pocket pages. So you're going to first need to cut 4 pieces of your cardstock to 7 inches by 8 1/4 inches. We're not going to do any scoring on these pieces. So once you have those 4 cut, go ahead and set those aside. Then we'll need to cut 4 more pieces that are 7 inches by 9 1/4 inches. On the 9 1/4 inch side, we are going to score this at 1/2 inch and 8 3/4 inches. Once we have our edges scored, I'm going to take my scissors and miter from my score line to the inward part of my tab. And why I do this is because whenever this is turned into a pocket, it'll help those photo mats to slide in because it won't catch on the edge of that paper. Once you have those cut, we'll go ahead and fold backward on the score line and use the bone folder to burnish these folds flat. Now I like to burnish on both sides because this is what helps that page to lay really, really flat. And I don't like my pages to be puckery, especially between these pages, because then if you have too much of a gap, the photo mats can slip out, and we don't want that to happen once the album is all put together. So your bone folder is basically the most important tool when you are creating your mini album. Now, once we have this part of our page, we're going to flip over to the back side and bring in the other piece. Now I'm going to use my tacky glue here, and I'm only going to do one at a time just to show you, especially if you are new, how to put your pages together. Now I'm going to be adding my adhesive. I know it's a little harder to see because it's white glue on white paper, but you don't want to use too much adhesive here because it'll warp your paper and also it'll leak out. So I've got my adhesive here. I'm going to take my other piece and line up that top edge with the top edge of the other paper. And then I'm going to make sure both sides are lined up, and then down at the bottom. So once I have it in position, I will go ahead and use my bone folder to burnish this together. And I like to always hold on the rest of the page just to burnish this, because I don't want this to move at all. So sometimes if you're not holding it well enough because the adhesive is wet, it can actually move your paper and be crooked, and we don't want that. Once we have that first side on, we'll go ahead and add adhesive to the other 1/2 inch tab section. Again, just making sure that you have enough glue to cover this entire thing, but not too much glue. So what I actually do is I just push a little bit of glue out at a time, and then I use the nozzle to push it around and spread it out. Now I'm going to smooth this down from the first one and then lay it flat this way. And then I'm going to take my bone folder and press it here so that it's nice and flat. It looks like it did shift just a little bit. So what I will probably end up doing is coming in here with my other paper trimmer. This is what can happen sometimes. It's not a big deal. It is paper and sometimes it shifts a little bit. So I'm just going to come in here, use my paper trimmer and cut just that little tiny edge off. So now we've got a straight, clean edge, and this one is good. So we don't need to do it on that other side. So I'm going to take my other 3 sets of pages and I'm going to turn them into my other pocket pages. And one other thing that I like to do is mark them. So I'm going to put P1F, that stands for page 1 front, and P1B, page 1 back. And I will go ahead and mark all of my pages just so that whenever I have all these built, I know which order I need to decorate them in. So now we have the base of the album ready to go. We have the cover and the hinges, and we have the 4 pocket pages. That's it for this tutorial. If you have just joined the tutorial series and you didn't check out the supply list video, you can go ahead and check that out to see all the supplies that you will need to create this album with me. Also, all the products that are on the Scrap and Create website or available in my Etsy shop are linked in the description box below. So you can go ahead and check those out, click on those links to purchase all of those products. In the next tutorial, I will begin building up these base pages, and we'll go through each of the base pages and build those up, and then we're going to go through and decorate them afterwards. See you in the next tutorial.